How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf 70 of Masechta Menachos. Friends, okay, the first chunk of the daf, the first Amud really, until the next Mishnah, is kind of a continuation of yesterday's daf. Talks about replanting. I guess my voice isn't quite back yet, but it talks about replanting produce and then it grows, and then what happens with it, kind of some of that technical kind of continuation of the technicalities of yesterday's daf until we get up to the new Mishnah. Now, the new Mishnah gets into some of the important details of Chadash, like which grains does Chadash apply to, or Bechlal, what does it apply to? And what about, can you harvest the grain before the Omer, and obviously you can't eat it? What level of growth does the produce have to reach for the Omer to allow it this year rather than have to wait for next year's Omer? So some of the technical but important, very important halachis of Chadash we will be learning about in the next Mishnah that we will be learning today. So friends, stick with me, come and join me. Hopefully we will have a peaceful hour. Yesterday was Shabbos, Mamish, there were no sirens, at least not that I'm aware of the whole Shabbos, which was unbelievable, although we did have a siren this morning. Some of the review of this stuff happened in the bomb shelter. So hopefully we will not be summoned back to the bomb shelter because it's a little bit late here and I think I am just going to have to record. So hopefully they will hold their fire for around the next 45 minutes. Friends, let's jump in to Daf Ayin of Masechta Menachos. By the way, friends, I'm sure probably almost everybody knows there was a nifilah. There was the like that warhead fell in the parking lot in the old city on Friday. Now the old city is about like a half an hour, 45 minute, like that. Where that happened was about a half an hour, 45 minute walk from where I live. Oh my gosh, we felt that like it was a block away. Like the alarm, the siren went, and we went down to the miklat, to the bomb shelter, and everyone like that. We've been running back and forth to the bomb shelter for like a while now, a few weeks, and you feel the booms. They're chazak. These are not like the Hamas missiles or the Hezbollah things or even the Houthi ones. This is a different story. I mean, over 100 people last night were injured by one of these things that fell. These are serious missiles. Anyways, so that was really that was like 45 minutes away, and we felt that strong. Like everyone was like, "Whoa!" Like what? Like we thought for sure we were gonna walk out to doomsday. Turns out it was 45 minutes away. Anyways, so these are Iran's really they're really trying to get us. Baruch Hashem. Okay. As we're going to say soon at the Seder. Friends, we start on Daf Samach Tes Amud Beis all the way at the bottom. Boy, Rabba says, Linyan Meiser, my. What about Meiser? Hey Chidami, what about Meiser? Kigon, de amdinu ve'asrinu v'shaslinu ve'osifa lihu. Okay, if you remember yesterday, we were discussing at the end of the daf, if you take, I don't know, what we were saying, then you uprooted it and then you replanted it. So it's that same idea here, that you're taking a stalk of wheat that has already been harvested and now putting it back in the ground. Not like taking the seeds and planting seeds. No, you're taking a stalk that was already harvested and putting it back in the ground so that it can keep on growing some more. That's what we're talking about. So what happened is you already harvested the wheat. And you already separated Trumas and Maasros. So this is chulin. These stalks that you put back in the ground are chulin. They've already been tied. So now you take it down. You already separated Trumas Maasros v'shaslinu. You took these stalks and you put them back in the ground. V'osifalu. And now when they're back in the ground, they continue to grow. They grew more. So now the shaila is, now what happens in terms of Trumas and Maasros? On the one hand, the stock was already, it's already chulin. It was part of a bigger group that was already Trumas and Maasros that was already tied. So on the one hand, this stock is already permitted. It's chulin. On the other hand, now there's new growth. You put it back in the ground, there's new growth. And what's the deal with the new growth? What's the deal even with the stalk itself now that you put it back in the ground? So what's going on here? So Vosifalu, and now that the wheat was put back in the ground, the stalks were put back in the ground, they grew more. So my father likes to say they grew some. Imtim Salomar, Lo Azlinon Basa Iker. So even if you want to say, right, so that was the Shali yesterday. Do we go based on the Iker? Do we go based on the stalk itself that was replanted, and that stalk was already tied, so therefore nothing else needs to be tied? But even if you say lo as lina basirka, that we don't go based on the initial stalk that was tied, then it's new stuff, and you're gonna have to separate trumas and maasros from the new stuff, from the new growth of the stalk. V'tosefes boy asuri, and you have to separate trumas and maasros from the new growth. Okay, ikramai, but what about the main stalk itself that was replanted? Does the replanted stalk need to be re-trumed and meiser? Abai says to Rabba, Maishna mikol chite v'sari de'amal. But so Abai says, why should this be any different than wheat and barley in general? What does that mean? Well, I'm no farmer. Do we have any farmers here, or even gardeners? I'm no farmer right now. I'm no farmer right now, but my impression is what you do is if you want to, I imagine in most cases if you want wheat, you'll probably buy seeds. I imagine, because I looked up on the internet at one point, like if you take an apple and you take, so let's say you take a pink lady apple. Now in Eretz Yisrael, pink lady apples are very good. I think in America, pink lady apples are not so great, which is ironic because many of the pink lady apples in Eretz Yisrael come from America. The best pink lady apples in Eretz Yisrael come from Eretz Yisrael. See, that's the thing. People in Eretz Yisrael would prefer the produce from Eretz Yisrael. First of all, it's very high quality, but also we're proud people here. We like our own stuff. But also, I imagine general people probably like to buy local things. It tends to be better, I think. Anyways, for whatever reason, I don't know. I guess local stuff is. Why is local stuff bad? I guess just when you just get the impression that when things are like shipped really far, it's a different story. Maybe they're harvested too early, like they're more of like a commercial thing. But if it's coming from down the block, I guess you can maybe have a better product. But whatever it is, let's say you take a pink lady apple, and you take a seed from a pink lady apple and you plant it. So I saw on the internet, you won't necessarily get pink lady apple tree or something like that. So you're probably going to want to plant from seeds. But I'll go upon him. Let's just say, strictly speaking, you don't have seeds. If you take a wheat stalk, so then you wouldn't just replant the wheat stalk. You would take the seeds, maybe the wheat kernels or something, and you would plant those. So meaning the point I'm making is, generally speaking, if you have a harvest of wheat, and now you separate trumas and maasros and stuff, and now you have chulin, when you take some of that wheat and you take their seeds and you plant those, and then those seeds decompose in the ground, and then new wheat grows from those seeds. So obviously in that case, everyone says that, that's just how kind of, obviously the new crop is going to have to be tied. You can't just say, well, the new crop came from an existing crop and that existing crop was already tied. No, if you take the seeds from, you harvest the crop, you separate trumas and maasros from the chulin. You'll probably keep most of it for yourself, but some of it, I guess, maybe you'll designate to replant. And then you take the seeds from that, you plant the seeds. Obviously, the new crops that grow from those seeds are going to have to be tied. You can't just say, but they came from crops that were already tied. So Abai wants to say, why should this be any different? So meaning, again, so what are we talking about? We're talking about where you took some crops, but in this case, though, and the Gemara is going to point this out, that this is a big difference, but in this case, you didn't actually take the seeds, you took the crops themselves and put them back in the ground. But Abai wants to argue, why should that be any different? And just like when you take the seeds and you plant them in the ground, so then what grows from those seeds needs to be tied. So, and the seed, right, and the seeds themselves, I guess, need to be tied. I mean, which ends up becoming what grows from them, because what you can do with the seeds, they decompose and stuff. But anyways, in this case, we should say, yeah, you should have to take Trumas and Maisis from the stalk themselves, from that which is planted in the ground. Okay. So Abai says to Rabba, Maishna mikolchite v'sari da'alma. Why should this be any different than planting wheat and barley seeds in general? Amalei. Rabba says to Abai, well, davar shazaru kala lo mi barley. Well, because when you take, as I was describing, normally, hopefully accurately, that normally when you take wheat stalks and you take the seeds from them and plant the seeds, right? Davar shazaru kala, and then the seeds then decompose in the ground and grow roots and then turn into a wheat plant. Yeah, obviously, lomi bayil, that I'm not talking about. Obviously, you have to separate Trumas and Maasros from everything that grows there. But what I'm asking about, says Rabbah, is davar she'ein zaru kala, something that is not going to decompose. When you take these stalks and you put them back in the ground, I don't know quite exactly how it works, but I get the impression it's just going to kind of pick up where I left off, kind of a thing. I guess that's the idea, right? You take the stalk, you put it back in the ground, and it starts nurturing from the ground once again. So what happens in this case? It's a little bit different. You have to separate Trumas and Maasros from the stalk that was replanted. So Tivshad le meha, well, maybe we can answer it from the following. Amar Yitzchak, Amar Yechanan, litra botzel she tikno, that if you have onions that have already been, so you have a bunch of onions, they've already been tied, vizaro, and then you replant the onions, so you're taking that which was already tied and putting it back in the ground. Sounds like our case. Misa'asu lefikulo, and you're going to separate truma from all of it. Trumas and Maasros. But also minus we also. The difference is that by the onions, that's considered a more normal thing to do, to plant onions in that matter. Take onions and put them back in the ground. Also, but over here, by the stalks, it's not really a normal thing to do, to take stalks of wheat and put them back in the ground. I guess you would harvest them and take the wheat kernels and stuff, and you'd probably replant some wheat kernels if you're not just buying new seeds anyways. I was watching some YouTube videos earlier about people harvesting wheat and stuff. Yeah, I guess what you'll do is you probably harvest. Usually, I think you would harvest the wheat, thresh it, winnow it, and then you would take the wheat berries, and I think that's probably what you would store away. But here, you're taking the stalk and just putting it back in the ground. Maybe let me have a little water. We'll go weiter. Okay, let's go weiter. Where are we? Fine. Amar le Reb Chanina bar Manyomi l'Abai, says Reb Chanina bar Manyomi l'Abai, otzit she'eno nakuv, add the words milo nakuv mau. Okay, let's have an otzit she'eno nakuv. Who wants to explain to us what an otzit she'eno nakuv is? There are two types of pots that you can grow things in, at least as far as the Mishnah is concerned, as far as I'm aware. There are two types of pots that things can be grown in. One is a pot with no holes in it, mamash a pot. I'm looking over here, in the corner, there's like a little garbage can. Let's say you use that, fill it up with soil, and you plant some stuff in there. And otzitz she'eno nakuv, a pot that has no holes in it, and you fill it up with soil, and you plant things in there. In otzitz she'eno, so that's an otzitz she'eno nakuv, and it's not considered connected to the ground. It's separate from the ground. However, in otzitz nakuv, if you have a pot that has a hole in the bottom, and therefore that kind of creates so there's a hole at the bottom where a root could theoretically get into the ground. But the point is that there's a hole at the bottom of the pot. That's what's called an otzitz nakuv. That's what's called a pot that has a hole in it. Now we're going to see later on a Mishnah in Demai that says, which Mishnah in Demai? Demai Parakeh Mishnah Yud. That says that an otzitz nakuv, an otzitz that has a hole in it, is considered, as far as we're concerned, is considered like it's planted in the ground. There's no difference between produce planted in the ground and produce planted in a pot that has a hole at the bottom. Now, Rav Chanina bar Manyomi asks Abaye, if you have an otzitz she'eno nakuv, so if you have you grew food in a pot, and the pot has no hole in it, so it's not connected to the ground. It's not considered like it grew from the ground. And then you want to separate Trumas and Maasros from whatever grew in that pot. So you separate Trumas and Maasros from another potted plant. What's the halacha? Well, ilo nakuv, halo nakuv. To which Abai says, I don't understand what you're asking. You're asking, produce from an otzitz she'eno nakuv was used to tithe other produce from an otzitz she'eno nakuv. What's the problem? It's the same type. Kilu. I don't understand what you're asking. It's not a problem at all, obviously. So dilma chazer v'nakvo ka'amart. Maybe what you're asking is a scenario where you planted some produce in an otzitz she'eno nakuv, in a potted plant that has no holes in it, so it's disconnected from the ground. But then after it was planted, I think maybe even grew some roots. So then, right, it started growing a little bit, and then you put a hole in it. So what happens then? Okay. So so wait, there's some stuff that you can add. Yeah, so let's add the stuff that you can add. I'm going to add the stuff that you can add, okay? So again, so Abaye says to Reb Chanina bar Minyomi, maybe you're talking about where you add an otzitz she'eno nakuv, a potted plant without holes, and you planted the thing in there, it started to grow. And then you drilled a hole in the bottom of the otzitz, so now you made an otzitz nakuv. So now, the note that adds stuff says Amar lehein. So Reb Chanina bar Minyomi says, that's what I'm asking. So Amar Abaye says to him, Hainu de Rabba. This is Rabba's question, right? That when so basically, what are you talking about? The otzitz she'eno nakuv. So you have this otzitz she'eno nakuv, and you put some produce in there, and it started to grow. And then you make the hole at the bottom, and now it's considered like it's connected to the ground. So Abai wanted to say this should be similar to Rabba's question about the stalk that you harvested and then you put it back in the ground. We wanted to say. So to which the Gemara says, but no, they're different because this is all one planting, right? You planted it in the ground, or you planted it in the pot, then you put a hole in the pot, but it's all one planting. And it's all considered one connection. But but over there it is two separate plantings, right? So meaning when it came to Rabba's case with the stalk, you're planting it twice. It was harvested and then you put it back in the ground. And we want to know if you still need to separate the Trumas and Maasros from that stalk that had already been separated from the ground and separated Trumas and Maasros from. Whereas over here, this is all just kind of one planting. And therefore, because it's one planting, I think we don't really we want to say that there shouldn't actually be any distinction between the part of the growth of the plant before the hole was made and after the hole was made. It's all just one planting, and you would just separate Trumas and Maasros from the plant that's in there. But that's different than the wheat that was harvested, tied, put back in the ground. Okay. Rabbo wants to know, Shiboles shemercha bichri. Okay. You have a pile of stalks, which is interesting. Because as I was saying earlier, I think usually when you harvest wheat, you would harvest it, thresh it, winnow it, and then you would kind of pile up the wheat berries. And now, nowadays, if you go on YouTube and type in like harvesting wheat or something, you'll see these massive fields with these like big old machines, like huge machines, just like rip up a field. And what will happen is these machines will push it, like cut the wheat, swallow it up, like thresh it, winnow it, and then shoot the kernels out into like a trailer that's riding right beside it in like a matter of in seconds. It's just it's like all one motion, just like swallows it up and spits out wheat kernels. Now in this case though, he didn't do that. He just harvested a bunch of stalks and put them in a pile, and apparently what's interesting to me is what it seems is like he's taking these stalks, putting them in a pile, doing meruach on the pile, meaning he's like putting them in a pile and like that's his pile, I guess, even though they're still on the stalks. They haven't been threshed or winnowed yet, as far as I can tell. And yet we're saying that they would be chayiv in Trumas Semaisers, right? So by Rabbi Bo asks, Shiboles, if you have a stalk, Shemercha Bechri, that was in a pile, and the pile was meruach, unless maybe you could say that maybe the pile was of like wheat berries, but this stalk happened to be in the pile. I'm not exactly sure. Vishasla, anyways, this stalk was definitely part of a pile that was meruach and therefore chayiv in Trumas Meiser. That's for sure. And now he takes this stalk out of the pile, Vishasla, and sticks it back in the ground for it to keep growing like we've been discussing. Vikara lea shem b'mechuber. And then, interestingly, what he does is, while the stalk is planted in the ground, he decides that he's separating it as truma. That he is separating it as truma. That when it's now connected, right, he has this whole pile that he did meruach, it's tevel, it's chayiv and trumas and meisers. He now takes this stalk and puts it in the ground. And while it's connected to the ground, he decides, this is going to be my truma. This stalk that's connected to the ground is going to be my truma. So Mao, what's the halacha? Is it truma or not? Kevan de mercha, since it was part of the pile that was meruach, tavla la, so it's tevel. Kikara aleh Hashem kadsha la, so it's tevel, just like the rest of the pile. And yeah, he put it back in the ground. But since it was tevel, like the rest of the pile, and now he says it's going to be my truma, so it's truma. Even though it's connected to the ground, it's truma. Oh, Dilmar, perhaps came to shasla, or perhaps we say no. Since he put it back in the ground, pakale tivla mina. It's no longer tevel. It's now a plant, and we'll have to worry about its own trumas and maestros later. But it's no longer teva. Right? Can no longer be made into truma for the rest of the pile. You replanted it. It's a plant now. Can't make it into truma anymore. The rabbi said to Abai, Im kain. Well, how about this? If you were to say that you can designate this replanted stalk as the truma for the whole pile, so matzinu truma b'mechuber lekarka. If we say that you can do that, well, then that means that you have truma that's connected to the ground, right? We have this whole pile of tevel. You take a stalk, put it in the ground, now designate it as truma. That would mean, if we say that that's doable, then that means that there's a concept of truma that's connected to the ground. Vitnan, and yet we learned in the Mishnah, the Maseres Hashas says he doesn't know where this Mishnah is, but apparently it's taught in a mysterious Mishnah. Lo matzina truma b'mechuber lekarka, that there is no such concept as truma that is connected to the ground. There is no such concept as truma that is connected to the ground. So it would sound like you can't designate this replanted stalk as truma. So Abai says to him, now I don't know who him is, because apparently it was the rabbis, so I'm not exactly sure who he's responding to exactly. I think I actually was reviewing this in the bomb shelter, so I couldn't look it up. I could look it up now. I have an article right here, but okay, whatever it is. Abai replied, Kitanya ha'ilinin ichyuve misa v'chomesh. Abai says, look, that mysterious Mishnah that says that there's no concept of truma that's connected to the ground, that's in terms of misa and chomesh, meaning a zar, a non-kohen who eats truma is chayiv misa b'dei shamayim. And if by accident he eats truma, he needs to pay it back to whoever it belongs to, plus a fifth. However, Abai says that when the Mishnah says lo matzinu truma b'mechuber lekarka, that there's no concept of truma that's connected to the ground, it's only in the concept of that, in the concept of if while it's connected to the ground, you take a bite out of it, so you will not be chayiv misa for having eaten truma. And if it was by accident, you won't have to pay it back plus a chomesh when it's connected to the ground. But in terms of can you designate it as truma for that pile in this interesting, unique scenario where we did meruach on a pile that included this stalk, and that was chayiv in truma, it's tevel, now you replant it and you want it to be, you designate it as truma. Can it be truma? Maybe. The italish va'achil. Now how come getting back to this concept of lo matzinu truma b'mechuber lekarka, right? That we said that there's no truma that's connected to the ground, and that means that you're not chayiv misa, you're not chayiv to pay back with a chomesh. The italish v'achil talishu. That's because if he separates it from the ground and then eats it, well, then it's no longer considered connected to the ground. The igochin v'achil, and if he just sticks out his head and munches from it like a chicken, so then but l'daito etzokol adam. Well, most people don't do that. Most people, when they eat wheat, they eat like bread. They don't just like go up to wheat plants and take a bite out of it. And therefore, but l'daito etzokol adam, we won't be chayiv misa for that or anything like that. So, okay, so back to our question. Can you designate this planted stalk as truma? Oh, no, well, okay. Back to this concept actually now of, so we haven't resolved the question of can you designate that planted stalk as truma. Now, we did, however, just say that if you kind of put your hands behind your back, it's like apple bobbing. Apple bobbing. That's like that. That's like one of those. That's one of those things they have in like Color War or something. Thank God, I don't think I ever did apple bobbing. Thank God, I don't think I ever did apple bobbing. I think that's when they take like a like one of those like big industrial sized garbage cans and like fill it up with water and they put some apples in there and like a chicken you have to like peck at his at apples. I think that's what apple bobbing is. Anyways, so we just said if you like apple bob a wheat stalk, you just like put your hands behind your back and just start trying to munch at a wheat stalk. And so we said you're not going to be chayiv misa if it's truma because but l'daitel eitzu kol adam. Everybody, nobody else does that. Now, however, frankly, Gemara, why should this be any different than midichsiva pinksa de ilfa than that which Ilfa had written on his notebook, on his ledger? Beitze nivlas of ator. If you have so nivlas of tor, we learned about nivlas of tor in Masechta Zvachim. That was a very difficult sugya. Anyways, nivlas of tor means, so normally nevela, right? If you have like a dead sheep or something, so it's nevela, and it's if you touch it, it's navatuma. Meaning not a slaughtered sheep, but a dead sheep. It's navatuma. However, if you have a dead chicken, nivlas of tahor, a chicken drops dead, so it is not, if you touch it, it's not an avatuma like that. If you touch it, it won't make you tummy. But if you eat it, so it will be metame begad ma beis abliya. So if you eat it, so then you'll become tummy. So now, beitze nivlas of tahor. So what if you have a dead chicken, not a slaughtered chicken, but a dead chicken? It died for whatever reason, and it had some eggs. Apparently, it had more than one egg. I don't know. One was outside the body, one was in the body. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe, I don't know. Well, whatever. Maybe there were eggs outside of the body. Kilo had already laid some eggs, but there was also an egg in the body. Nivlas ha'ofatar. So miktsasun b'chutz, miktsasun b'fnim. Some eggs outside have already been laid, but some are still in the hen. Right. So mibifnim mitamin begad ma beis abliya. So if you take a bite out of, if you like, I don't know, pick up I don't exactly understand, but why would anybody do this? But I guess if you like pick up the chicken and like eat the egg while it's in the chicken, which again is similar to like eating the stalk when it's still connected to the ground. Here you're eating the egg while it's still in the chicken. Sounds pretty gross to me. So mibachutz ein mitamin begad ma beis abliya. But if you eat the eggs that are not inside of the chicken, well, then it's not nivlas of tar. It's just eggs, and that would be okay. But if you like eat the egg while it's in the chicken, it will be considered nivlas of tahor. So and you will be tummy for that. But what wouldn't we say batla daito eitzel kol adam, that's not a normal thing to do? Just like we said that eating wheat while it's connected to the ground is not normal. Eating a chicken eating an egg while it's still connected to the chicken should be considered abnormal. So talush avide inche da'achle hachi b'mechuber lo avide inche da'achle. The difference is that a chicken, which is something that's not connected to the ground, the egg is connected to the chicken, but the chicken is not, you could pick it up. It's not connected to the ground. So therefore, it's, I guess people do that. Is that a thing? People eat eggs that are inside chickens? Apparently so. But wheat that is not connected to the ground, wheat that is connected to the ground, people won't wheat bob. They won't go pecking at wheat like a chicken. Okay, fine. Azoy. Okay, fine. So we said again, talush avida inja da achle ochi, a chicken which is not connected to the ground, it's disconnected from the ground. People could just eat the egg out of it. B'mechuber lo avida inja da achle, but wheat that's connected to the ground, people don't just peck out like a chicken. Omar Rav Tavyomi bar Kisno, Omar Shmuel Azorea Kilayim ba'otzitz she'eno nokuv. Getting back to otzitz she'eno nokuv. So you have a pot that has no holes in it. It's a completely potted pot, like okay, no holes, a solid pot, and you grow kilayim in the pot, in the solid pot. So osir, so the kilayim is osir. Okay, it's also you're not allowed to do it. Amar Abaye bishlam yashminon loke makas mardus midrabanan shapir. So says Abaye. So what are you telling me? Okay. If you take it, you take a pot and you plant kilayim in there, right? Two separate species, you plant them together in the pot. So if you're telling me don't do it, and if you do it, we're going to hit you, makas mardus midrabanan. So shapir. Okay. Wow. Okay, we're going to give you makas midrabanan. That's what we're saying. Have we ever interacted with makas mardus before? By the way, I don't know if we have. Have we? Let me. ChatGPT, I don't trust so much, but let's see. Where does the Gemara talk about makas mardus? I don't remember. Let's see. They call it makas mardus. Kiddushin? Oh, it comes from Kiddushin. Nazir? Okay. And ksubis. And psachim. Okay. Does it say anything about menachos? No, it doesn't say anything. I don't really trust ChatGPT, but I'm gonna have a look at this. I don't really remember. I guess maybe it probably did come up, but I thought that Masechta Makas maybe we would talk about makas mardus. I don't remember us talking about makas mardus in Masechta Makas. Yeah, I think I wanted to know a little bit more about them, like when do we do them and stuff. All right, Akuponim. So where are we? So Yashmin look at makas. Okay, so if says Abaye, look. If what you're telling me is that don't plant kilayim in a pot, and if you do, b'chai makas mardus, okay, fine, it's a chiddush. Okay, great. Elo osir my kamash malon to midrabanan av yizriya, but just to say that it's osir, like okay, what are you telling me? That even though it's a potted plant and it's not connected to the ground, it's still osir, it's still considered zriya midrabanan. Tanina, we have a Mishnah. Now this is the Mishnah in Demai that I quoted earlier. Right, the Mishnah that says that a pot, an otzitz nakuv, a pot that has a hole in it, is mamish considered connected to the ground. In that same pasuk, in that same Mishnah, it says, Torah misha eino nakuv, al anakuv, that if you have two plants, one has a hole in it and one does not have a hole in it. So I'm saying two pots, right? Two pots. One has a hole in it, one does not have a hole in it. So the pot that has a hole in it is chayiv chumas ma'asos midoraisa. Has a hole in it. It's connected to the ground. The pot that has no hole in it is not chayiv. Chumas ma'asos midoraisa. Obviously, that was a double negative. Let's make it positive. In order for it to be chayiv, chumas ma'asos midoraisa, it has to have a hole in it. Therefore, if it doesn't have a hole in it, then there's no chayiv chumas ma'asos midoraisa. Again, the double negative. So now, Torah misha eino nakuv al anakuv. If you have this pot that has a hole in it, and it's chayiv chumas ma'asos midoraisa, and you say, okay, I'm going to separate chumas ma'asos from the pot that has no holes in it, and that'll work for the pot that has holes in it. So we say truma v'yachzor v'yisrom. So we say first of all v'yachzor v'yisrom. You're gonna have to do this over. You're gonna have to separate chumas ma'asos properly for the pot that has a hole in it because it's chayiv chumas ma'asos midoraisa. So you're gonna have to separate truma and ma'aser midoraisa. But nonetheless, what you separated from the otzitz she'eno nakuv, still we say it's truma v'yachzav yisrael. We still are going to treat it as truma because what you planted in the otzitz she'eno nakuv, in the potted plant, is still going to be considered planting, and therefore it is going to be considered truma. So we already know from that Mishnah that planting in a potted plant, even when there are no holes, when it's solid, it's still going to be considered planting, at least midrabanan. So therefore, to tell me that planting kilayim in a potted plant is asur, I already know it from that Mishnah. Of course, it's going to be asur. It's considered planting, even just on a dirabanan level, but it's planting. So therefore, it must be that what you're teaching is that we're going to hit you dirabanan hitting, makas mardus, givaldig. And now getting up to the next section and the next Mishnah of today's daf that talks about that talks about Chadash, which foods are chayiv in Chadash, and other stuff about Chadash that we're going to see right now. Friends, this Mishnah is also found as it's the first Mishnah Masechta Chala as well. And this Mishnah says that the chameshes mine dagon, wheat, barley, spelt, oat, and rye, they are chayiv in challah. If you make a dough of wheat, barley, spelt, oat, rye, any of those, a dough from any of those species, they're chayiv in challah. Umitztarfin zeh im zeh, and they join together. The Gemara is going to explain what it means that they join together. Vasurim b'chadash milifnei Pesach, and also these 5 species are chadash applies to them. That the chameshes mine dagon, before the Omer, you have to be concerned about Chadash. Umilikzo lifnei Omer, and also, we do not harvest them before the Omer. We wait until after the Omer to harvest them. We talked about, probably 2 days ago, that you can harvest them by hand, but not with a sickle, or certainly not with a John Deere turbine. Im eshrishu kodem la'omer, ha'omer matiron v'imlav asurin ad she'ava omer abba. And when we offer the minchas ha'omer on the second day of Pesach, and now the chadash is permitted, which chadash is permitted? Any chadash that by that point had taken root, it is now mutter. Even if it's just taken root, it's still literally a seed in the ground. There's nothing to show for it. It's a seed in the ground, but it took root. When it grows and you ultimately harvest it, it will be mutter because the omer is matir. But if any seeds in the ground that have not yet so much as taken root, maybe you planted them yesterday or something, so then you're gonna have to wait till the next year's omer. Again, imishrishu, if they've already taken root, kodem the omer, before the minchas omer is offered, ha'omer matir, and the minchas omer is matir them. The imla, but if they have not yet taken root, asur not shiava omer abba, they're asur until the next year's omer is offered. Zakti Gemara Tana, we learned in a baraise. It's taka a Mishnah, I believe. What do we see over here? Okay, there is a Mishnah in Masechta Chala. There's a Mishnah Masechta Chala. Which Mishnah in Masechta Chala? Perek Daled Mishnah Beis. I believe that this is also in Perek Daled Mishnah Beis of Masechta Chala, Mishnayis. Kusmin min chitin, that spelt is a type of wheat. Shibol l'shua v'shifon min sorin. Oat and rye are a type of barley. And what this means is that in terms of challah, if you have less than a shear of challah of wheat and less than a shear of challah of spelt, but they join together, and now they are a proper shear, so they'll be chayiv in challah. But if that happens with wheat and barley, so then they wouldn't join together. So that's what we're saying. We're saying that kilu, wheat and spelt are categorized together, and barley, I think really the truth is barley with all of the others except for wheat, if they kind of touch each other, come together, you would be chayiv in challah. But anyways, okay. That's how they're categorized. Now, kusmin is gulba. Shifon is dishra. And shibol shul is shibole tala. Hanein or Zadochan lo. Only these 5 speed the chameshes mine dagon are charovin and challah, but not rice and millet. How do we know this? Amar Shlokish says, Asya lechem mimatzah. By challah it says, and by matzah, or Pesach is coming up, lechem oni. And by matzah it says lechem oni, and it's chameshes mine dogin. So also by challah we're talking about chameshes mine dogin. Vasam gufa minolan. How do we know that by matzah it's dafka chameshes mine dogin? Amar Shlaki says Shlaki of Chintana de Rabbi Shmuel, Chintana de Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Amar Kra, the pasuk says lo seochel olav chomet lo sochel olav lo sochel, I believe, right. Lo sochel olav chometz. Do not eat chometz with the korban Pesach. Shivas yom toichel olav matzah. Eat matzah. Don't eat chometz. Eat matzah. Lechem oni. Dvar ma'boyim lidei chimutz al miotze ben lidei chovaso bePesach. That when it comes to matzah, matzah must be made from things that can become chometz. Yatsu elu, to the exclusion of rice and millet. She'ein boin lidei chimutz el lidei sirchon. They don't become chometz. They become spoiled. So therefore, matzah is made from the chameshes mine dagon, and so is challah. Challah is offered from the chameshes mine dagon. Mitzdarfin zeh im zeh, and they join tzezamen. The chameshes mine dagon join together. Tana, it was taught. Hatvua, wheat that has not yet been processed, meaning it's like wheat berries, but it hasn't yet been made flour or anything. V'akmochim, and flour. So the wheat berries, the flour, vabatsekis, and dough. So you have different parts of the process. Wheat berries, flour, dough. Mitzdarfin zeh zeh, they could join tzazamen, they could join together. L'may yochasa, for what? Rav Kana says, Rav Kana in Chadash. In terms of Chadash, I imagine a Chadash, we're probably talking about eating a kazayis of Chadash, you'd be chayiv, right? That's generally the shir of achila. So if you have less than a kazayis of wheat kernels, and less than wheat berries, and less than a kazayis of flour, and less than a kazayis of dough, and they join tzazamen, and you eat it in a spoonful of Chadash, you'll be chayiv for eating Chadash. I guess chayiv makis, hit you. Rav Yosef says Rav Yosef in chometz bePesach. If they become chometz and you eat a kazayis combined on Pesach. Rav Papa Amar the Indian Meiser Sheni. Papa says in terms of Meiser Sheni, the achil lechutz limkoma laki, that if you eat a combined kazayis outside of Yerushalayim, we will hit you. Rav Amar says Rav the Indian tumas ochlin. It's talking about tumas ochlin. That to join together to make a kibeya for tumas ochlin, tumas, right? Food is mitame if it is a kibeya, and these wheat berries, flour, what was the other thing? Dough, they could join tzazamen, that if they become tame, they could be mitame other things. V'akamazban the tvua v'kmachin dumi de batsekis, and it's saying that the wheat berries and the flour are like the dough. Mahosam uchle be'ene, just like the dough is food, right? Food that's in front of us, that's tangible. Avhocha nami, also by the wheat berries, by the flour, uchle be'ene. It needs to be food. V'atanim, we learn in the Brisa, chita ben klufa ben she'ena klufa mitzdarefes. As we learn in the Brisa, that when it comes to wheat berries, whether they're klipas, whether their husks have been removed, excuse me one second, whether their klipas have been removed or whether or not, it doesn't matter, they're all food, and they could join together in terms of making a kibeya. I imagine that we're talking about tumas ochlin. Mitzdareves. Se'ora klufa mitzdareves, she'ena klufa ena mitzdareves. But when it comes to barley, only if its klipa has been removed, can it join together. But if the klipa is still on it, it can't join together because that klipa is not edible and it won't be able to join together. So we see that dafka, when it's food, it could join together. Ini is this over Tanit Bishmuel al kol zer zerua sheri zareh. It says by if a dead sheretz falls on something, and it becomes any food that dead cherries falls in. Kederach shebnei adam motziin lizriya. It's like they take it to plant. Chita beklipasav, v'sara beklipasav, adashim beklipasan. That wheat, even when the klipa, the shell, the husk is on it. Same for barley, same for lentils. So we see that the barley can have its husk on it. Lokasha habilachos habiyaveshos. It depends if we're talking about moist or dry. When they are moist, they can have their husk on it. But when they're dry, so then they can't have their husk on them. Vasurim bechadash milifnei apesach. And you're not allowed to eat chadash of any of these 5 grains before Pesach. So there is a different. So Rashi's girsa is actually lifnei omer. I'm going to stick with that girsa because it's going to come up. This next Gemara is like a little bit subtle. So I'm just going to stick with Rashi's girsa because we're going to go with Rashi's perish. So vasur and chadash milifnei omer, and eating chadash is also before the omer. How do we know this? Omer shlakish asya lechem mimatzah. Okay, that it says lechem by the omer. It says right v'lechem v'kol v'chaim lo sochlu ad etzem hayom hazeh. Right, so it says v'lechem is the first word. Right, don't eat lechem, and it says lechem by matzah, lechem oni, and just like by matzah, it's the chameshes minei dagon. So also by eating chadash, we're talking about chameshes minei dagon. V'liktzor lefnei Pesach, and harvesting before Pesach. Right, don't harvest these things before Pesach. I don't know this. Amar Rabbi Yochanan asir reishis. It says by harvesting these grains, it says uktzartem es ktsira v'avesim es omer reishis ktsirchem elakoin. Talks about the harvesting, and it says reishis, and also says reishis by challah. And again, challah is the chameshis minei dagon. So also the chameshis minei dagon, we don't harvest before the omer is offered. Now, my kodem the omer, when it says that we don't eat, okay, this is a little bit subtle, so we got to just have on our subtle hat. My kodem the omer, what does it mean that we don't eat chadash before the omer? So Yonah omer kodem ktsiras omer. So Yonah says it means before the harvesting of the omer. We don't eat chadash before the harvesting of the omer. When's the harvesting of the omer? The harvesting of the omer is at night. The harvesting of the omer is the night, right? The night of the 16th, i.e. the night between the 15th and the 16th, the night following the first day of Yom Tov. Okay, the night of the 16th. You can't eat chadash until then. After then is already the next day, and you can eat it already by Heir Mizrach. Reb Yossi bar Zavda Omer says, Yossi bar Zavda kodem avoas ha'omer. That you can only eat the chadash after the omer has been brought. Only after the omer has been brought. So according to Reb Yonah, you can eat the chadash after, once the omer has been harvested, i.e. after the night of the 16th, already from sunrise. And Reb Yosef bar Zavda says you have to wait until the omer is offered. Now, Tnam, we learned in our Mishnah, Asurin b'chadash lifnei ha'omer. Now, our Mishnah says that you're not allowed to eat the chadash until the omer, which we just said is maybe talking about sunrise, maybe it's talking about after you offer the omer. The liktzor, when you're not allowed to harvest it, lifnei a-pesach. You're not allowed to harvest it until after the Pesach. What does Pesach mean? Until the first day of Pesach, i.e. only at night, at the night of the 16th, you can harvest it. Now, according to Rabbi Yonah, he also says that the eating it is talking about the night of the 16th. But you can only eat it after the night of the 16th. And he's saying also you can only harvest it basically the night of the 16th. So Bishlam al-Man the Omer Kodem Avoas Omer. So I understand according to Rabbi Yosef bar Zavda, so he says that basically you can harvest it at the night of the 16th, but you can only eat it after the Omer has been offered the next day. So I know Deloka Arivlu Vitanilu. So I understand why they are taught in the Mishnah separately that for eating the Omer, right, for eating the Chadash, you have to wait until after the Omer is offered. And for harvesting it, you can't harvest it until the night of the 16th. They're two separate times. But according to Rabbi Yonah, who says that essentially they're the same time, you can't eat the Chadash until after it's harvested on the night of the 16th, and you also can't harvest it until the night of the 16th. Le'ervinu v'lesninu, just mix them, just bring them together, and teach one statement. Asurin b'chodosh v'liksor, you're not allowed to eat, you're not allowed to harvest, lifnei Pesach, before the first day of Pesach. After the first day of Pesach, you can now harvest and eat it. You could just teach them together, you don't need to teach them separately. Eli itmar asef itmar. Okay, so rather that the machlokes between Rabbi Yonah and Rabbi Yossi bar Zabda is going on the seifa of the Mishnah, which is imishrishu kodim laomer omer matiron. That when the Mishnah says that if they took root before the omer, so then the omer will be matir them. My kodim laomer. What does it mean that they took root before the omer? Rabbi Yonah Omar Kodem Ktsiras HaOmer. Rabbi Yonah says it means that they took root before the harvest of the Omer, i.e. before the night of the 16th. Rabbi Yossi bar Zabda Omer Kodem Ktsiras Havas HaOmer. Whereas Rabbi Yossi bar Zabda says that they have to take root before the bringing of the Omer the next day on the day of the 16th. Omer le Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yoshia Didare. Rabbi Elazar says to Rabbi Yoshia of his generation, as opposed to Rabbi Yoshia the Tana, right? This is Rabbi Elazar the Amora was saying to Rabbi Yoshia of his generation, rather than Rabbi Yoshia the Tana. Lo teis v'karich adim afrashas le lehai leha milsa. Don't go anywhere until you explain to me the following. Minayin laomer shemati b'ashrosha. How do we know this? How do we know that by the Omer, what is permitted by the Omer is dependent on if it took root or not. If it's taken root, the Omer permits it. If it hasn't yet taken root, the Omer doesn't permit it. Now remember, what does it mean to take root? To take root means you plant some seeds, and the seeds start to grow root. That's it. There's nothing that you can see above ground. Nothing's sprouting, nothing's nothing. Literally, you have seeds that you planted them, and they just started to take root. Comes the Omer. They're mutter, i.e. when they grow and you finally harvest them, since they had already taken root in the ground before the Omer was offered, when you harvest them, you can enjoy them. So Minolan, how do we know this? The Pasuk says, Oviv, that the Pasuk says by the Omer, that you will offer the Oviv, you'll offer the early ones, you'll offer the grains that are fully grown by the time of the Omer, implying, implying that there are those that are not yet fully grown, and those will also be permitted. You'll offer the ones that are fully grown, the ones that are fully grown early, but the ones that aren't, like the ones that took root, you won't offer them as the korban mincha, but you'll eat them whenever they're ready. But v'dilma delav aviv ul'olam da'ayil shlish. Well, 1 second. There's a very big gap between not being fully grown at the time of the Omer and literally just a seed that has some roots coming out of it. Maybe what it means is that you bring the offering from the barley that is fully grown, and the barley that is not fully grown but is at least a third, that is permitted. I don't know about seeds that have taken root. Rather Shmuel, that the pasuk says that that you separate that the omer is mehochel chermesh, from sickling. And when do you sickle? When do you harvest the wheat? When it's at least reached a third. Implying lav mechad deika delav bar chermesh. Does it not mean therefore that there are those that yes, we can offer the omer from that which has reached a third, but there is others that haven't yet reached a third, i.e. all they have is seeds, or is seeds that taken root. V'dilma delav bar chermesh. Okay, but maybe they aren't yet a third of the growth and ready to harvest, but v'olam shachas, but they at least have something to show for themselves. There's some kind of grass, something that they can be fed to animals. At least they have to have something to show for themselves to be permitted by the Omer. Rabbi Yitzchak says, Rabbi Yitzchak, comma. Yeah, but it says in the pasuk, right? Shiva Shavuos tisbalach mehochel chermesh bakoma. That it has to in order. I think the point is, in order to offer the omer from it has to be at least standing, a stalk, implying that there are others though that will be mutter that you're not going to offer the omer from them, but they'll be permitted by the omer, even if they're just seeds that have taken root. V'duma d'labar kamul olam agam. Okay, fine, but maybe you could say maybe they don't. Okay, so maybe fine. In order to offer the omer from them, they have to at least be standing, at least shachas, at least some level of growth. But there are others that'll be permitted that aren't yet there, but at least they're like coming out of the ground, even if they're drooped over. Elo amarova, rather says Rav Asher Tizra Mishazriya. Okay, rather says Rava, look, it says by the Shtei Alechem. By the Shtei Alechem it says V'chagakotzer bikurei ma'asecha asher tizra basada. So by the Shtei Alechem it says that which you will seed. Now the Shtei Alechem, it's the same grain that is permitted by the Omer outside of the Beis HaMikdash, is permitted by the Shtei Alechem in the Beis HaMikdash. So therefore, if we're talking about seeds by the Shtei Alechem, it's also seeds when it comes to the Omer, because it's the same produce that we're talking about. Popular Rava says, Well, if we're just talking about seeds, then why do we even need the roots? Literally, if you put seeds in the ground the day before, right, the day before Pesach, that should be enough. Seeds, Tizra, as long as you planted it. So Amalei, Sudani. So Rava says to Rapapa Sudani, which could mean either like a Talmud Chacham, like it says Soda Hashem Lireav, or it could be talking about that a beer brewer is called a Sudani, and Rapapa, of course, was a successful beer brewer. Basadek, if it says Basade, it says right, that yes, you planted, but also it has to be part of the field. It has to at least have taken root. Okay, so we see Asher Tizra Basade, that so long as you planted it and it's in the field and it's taken root, that's all you need. You don't need anything to actually have to grow out of the ground yet. You planted enough time for it to take root. At that point, the Omer will permit that grain once it is harvested. Friends, that was Daf Ayin, Daf 70 of Masechta Menachos. What the first part of the Daf was kind of a continuation of yesterday, kind of technical things about replanting wheat, and do you have to separate Trumas and Masris, and comparing it to other things of replanting, and Otzutz Nakov, Otzutz She'eno Nakov, some very kind of technical stuff. I'm not really going to kind of go through those things. And then we got up to a new Mishnah, which talks about which foods Chadash applies to. And it applies to the Chameshes Minei Dagon, very important. Chadash, what does Chadash apply to? Chameshes Minei Dagon. And what does the Chadash allow? It permits any seeds that have taken root. By the time that the Omer is offered, any seeds that have taken root are going to be permitted by the Minchas HaOmer. Friends, that was Daf Ayin of Masechta Menachos. Hope you enjoyed. Cheers.